These stories would also inform our discussion, as we'll be looking to discuss with the mercurial publisher and editor-in-chief of the Daily Courier, Seun Oni, who joins us virtually this morning. Remember that you're also part of the conversation, and if you choose to react to any of the stories making the round, kindly visit our social media pages to have your voice and comments heard on the show. Now, having said that, let's see if we can begin our conversation with Mr. Seun Oni this morning. Hello, good morning to you, Seun. How are you doing?
Good morning, Mr. Bind. I'm very well, and how are you doing too?
Thanks for asking. I'm doing very well. Now, let's begin with a headline also captured by your newspaper this morning, talking about how Nigeria is going to be impacted by these global tariff war. We've seen a 14% tariff imposed on all non-mineral exports from Nigeria. How does this affect the Nigerian economy?
Thank you so much. The direct impact on the economy is already coming in very hard, and you saw that one of the major reactions by government was actually from the monetary policy side, the CBN. Hundreds of millions of dollars is being quickly mopped up, and when the result comes out in the next few days,
Mr. Seun, sorry to cut you. When you say hundreds of dollars have been mopped up, please put it in a term that most viewers would understand. How is the CBN looking to protect Nigeria against this trade tariff in terms of the dollars in use?
Oh, okay. I was just trying to lay background before going very quickly to that. The first thing that was noticed about the tariff is not actually the direct non-mineral export to US that was hammered. It was actually the effect of the tariff on the oil market. And of course, Nigeria's earning, almost 90% of our earnings is actually from petroleum. So prices of crude oil, as I speak to you, have dipped. Before the tariff, prices of crude oil stood at between $72 to $70 per barrel. But as I speak to you, as of yesterday, is trading at 63, 64. That's if you are talking about Brent or the other shades of crude oil. What that means is that the projection that underpins the foreign exchange we were earning from oil has depleted within just few days of slashing that tariff. So what CBN has done in return is that our foreign reserve had quickly been called on, and the dollar was mopped up to fight that dip in the foreign exchange that accrued to us as a country. So what that means in layman term is that the quantity of dollars, the amount, the value of dollars that will be available to the federal government, where we have our FAC, where the federal, state, and local government will now share, would depreciate, will reduce. And the impact on the economy, because our economy is largely dollar denominated, our transactions, our trading is dollar denominated, we will have far little dollar available to us. So the CBN, in order to fight this, so that we don't have a situation where the naira to dollar that had been stable over the past few months will dip down, and we start seeing an unfortunate situation where naira, the differential between naira and dollar is widening again. So that's where we find ourselves. Our other export to the US again will be impacted, but the direct impact that we have seen in the past 72 hours is that the resources available to us as a nation are seriously slimmed down. So we just hope. But I heard on the fiscal side, the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, for instance, had said that we will find a way to ensure that the impact of the tariff of the US will be minimized. So the coming days is going to show how our handlers are able to navigate through these intricacies.
Well, in the coming days, we'd all know, but off the back of the comments of the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Waledu, it's on the need to take a second look at the 2025 budget. Because like you rightly said, some of the indices that we are judging our fiscal plan on have been altered, particularly the price of oil globally. In the 2025 budget, expected at $75 per barrel. And now you told us it is well below 65. And who's to say it would not decline even further? What does this do entirely to our plan for fiscal spending in 2025 if these prices do not come up?
Brian, I'm surprised at the very optimistic projection in our budget. And in fact, our last conversation, remember I told you that our economy is not completely shielded from global vagaries in the world. But I really don't know that it will come this fast because my immediate response when the president slashed on, I think he called it the Liberation Day or something, when he slashed tariff to virtually all the countries in the world, was that most of them, due to the poor position of the United States, will prefer to judge than to war, because it's obvious, even the US itself and economics were upfront, that Trump himself is actually playing with fire. The US will not be shielded if other nations' economy fall into recession. It's just a matter of time. The US will follow. But what we have seen in the past few days is that the US, if it's not careful, if it's not more circumspect about this, the way it's going about this tariff of 18, all the stocks in the US had actually been depleting. They have been depreciating. But it has not gotten to a point where it will crash like we saw some few years ago. But if it does not quickly tighten the nose and ensure that majority of its major trading partners, especially the EU bloc, and find a way around the Asia bloc, those are the major trading partners of the United States of America. Apart from the corner of Africa. Corner of Africa, our percentage of trading with the US is a bit minimal compared to EU and Asia, especially China. But the rhetoric from the White House by Trump is not showing that he sees the overarching impact of what he's doing. How did Nigeria actually come in here? Like I said earlier, over 89% of our foreign exchange is still from oil. Even though we have seen appreciable progress in our non-oil exports and, of course, the resources, the foreign exchange earning from non-oil. But as we speak today, that is the reality of our country. Almost 90% of our earning is from oil. So when there is a glut in the price of oil, immediately our economy takes the bite. And that's what we are seeing. Just few days of a glut on the oil market, we are seeing this. And unfortunately, projections have shown that this may continue for another few more weeks. And our Minister of Finance, the CBN, they will have to roll their sleeves to ensure that we can fight, because I really don't know how far we can fight back if after just few days we have thrown the quantum of dollars that we have thrown. If it continue into 2-3 weeks, I just wonder how we are going to fight back, really.
Well, we're talking about fighting back. It's important to point out that there was also a launch of state-owned enterprise performance scorecard yesterday, where the minister made those comments you just analyzed. And I'm just wondering, Are there still going to be some steps taken in the right direction? Because where some people say when one door closes, another opens, is there any of such situation in terms of opportunities for Nigeria to somewhat triumph beyond this global trade tariff war?
The problem with Nigeria is that we have this penchant of not digging our well before we are testing. What smart nations globally do is that they dig their well, waiting for when there will be drought. And so when they are thirsty, they can just go to their well and, of course, do minimal job of fetching water from their well. We had this window a few years ago by the immediate past president to ensure that we now have a huge chunk of our trading in the Chinese yuan. Of course, you were aware of that then when we made that overture, so that we have a lot of Asian people buying our oil as well. Why not look for a currency like the yuan, which is a major currency in that part of the world, to trade in? So that when you have issues as this, let's assume we are having just about 40 something percent of our trading in the US dollars, and we are having a sizable percentage of our trading in other denominations. It means that we'll be a bit shielded
to all these fluctuations as it affects the dollar.
Yes, we can juggle between the baskets. That was the thinking then. But we signed it with a lot of fanfare. Economists lauded what we were doing, and before you know it, it was not followed through. This administration came in and discussions were going on that, and the administration by next month will be 2 years. Nothing concrete seems to have been done. So that's where we find ourselves. So now we have found ourselves in a difficult situation. We will have to find a way of navigating it, because we had the opportunity to actually forestall this type of a situation we are finding ourselves. It's too early in the day, and the person in the White House is not a typical human being. I'm sorry to use that word. You can see the protests going across the United States against the tariff policy, but he has not budged. Yesterday he was speaking to people, and he shifted all the blames to China, and everyone knows that China is simply not the aggressor in this instance. The United States, and of course Trump himself, is the aggressor. And so the ball is actually in his court to ensure that he moderates the way he goes after everyone and everything on his track.
Now let's talk about the perceived aggressor here, President Donald Trump, who in his defense says he is looking to protect trade within the United States. He has also threatened an extra 50% tariff on China in particular. Do you see any basis for his excuse that he's looking to strengthen the U.S. in terms of its own exports, other than it being largely import-driven, as many allege?
Sadly, every successive American president had actually had that as one of his policy. What he's saying is not novel. The immediate past administration did that. We saw how they were putting tariffs on China and a number of other countries. It's always part of the policy mix in the White House. But the way and manner he has gone about his own, he's making it sound as if it's a novel thing he's doing. No, it's not novel. Obama, the last time I checked, Biden, at least I followed from Biden era as an economic student. I followed all those presidents up till Trump now. Everyone had always had that as one of their policy options. But you can imagine what somebody was asking in an economic forum, that what will you gain, for instance, slashing tariff on a nation like South Sudan? What do you really want to gain? It's like you are beating someone who is
already down.
who is not just down. I don't want to use down. It's like beating a cadaver. What do you want to gain? You know, that's a nation that's been torn in war for since their existence. They started fighting the very year they got independence. And the only thing you can do as the superpower of the world that you are is to further rub it in their face and withdraw in one full sweep the what's it called, the access, you know, the travel access into US by every citizen of the country. Who does that? You know, it's such a ridiculous move. And I think this is a whole lot for political science students and political science scholars to study, because this is actually, you can't put it in any of the theories that have existed. So it's a Trump theory itself in international diplomacy, and it's actually something that is new, the way it's going about it, really.
Well, let's leave this issue on the global stage and how it affects Nigeria and come to one issue that is rooted at home, much like they say charity begins at home. Whilst we're looking for this financial stability on the foreign front, the calls for financial autonomy for our third tier of government, the local governments, continue to be stalled. And it's over the stringent measures that the Apex Bank, the central bank, has outlined for council chairmen to meet as it concerns owning a direct account. Now, the governors are also being accused of somewhat stifling this process. How do you judge this development on local government autonomy, with the issue of financial autonomy remaining largely a hurdle?
Thank you. It's a question that should bother every Nigerian. My position has always been, from the very day that the Apex Court gave that judgment about the financial autonomy of local government, somehow the government was supposed to move very fast and ensure that the force of law is louder than empathic politicking. What we have seen immediately after the judgment is that politics has taken the better side of a legal judgment, a legal issue. We have gone past the period of sitting down in a round table. The governors actually missed that opportunity. And allowing this to stall any further simply says two things about the federal government. One, it has no respect for court judgment. Number two, it's more interested in massaging the ego of a few. And when I say a few, I mean governors. The whole dynamics that brought us here, ab initio, that even led us to going to the court, was governors turning local government into their appendages. They determine the election, determine who wins the election, determines how the monies there are spent, and most times they are not spent for the people. And the reason why the framers of the Constitution made the local government the third tier, unlike other democracies in the world, where the local government is simply administrative convenience areas of the states, is the thinking that government should get closer to the people. And we saw it when local government were actually allowed to function. Local governments were handling roads, they tar roads, they build schools, they manage those schools. And it's unfortunate that governors they've actually hide under the excuse of a problem they created. And so it's becoming very obvious that they intentionally created that problem to ensure that the local government does not lead to the expectation of the framers of the Constitution and people who thought that bringing government closer to the people is the easiest way to develop the grassroots. The governors have actually hid under the excuse that for a number of years, many of the local governments have not been able to meet up with their financial obligations. First, to their workers, and two, to some category of staff, especially local government teachers who are under this local government and some of their staff. And there are states, for instance, Benue State, Osun State for many years, many of the states of North, Zamfara, Katsina, and a whole lot of them, you still have local government workers not being paid years of arrears. You have primary school teachers who are under the local government payroll being owed salaries for many months. I mean many months. So government have hid under that if they are given autonomy, there is a tendency for them not to be able to pay their staff. And I actually said, no, that's not correct. They were not able to pay their staff because these same governors usually take a huge chunk of the money that accrues to local government. So if this money, if they allow them to open account to the CBN, the way the federal government has suggested, all the money will go to the local government. Then we can hold local government accountable for paying or not paying their staff. And like I always say comically, when we begin to see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 local government chairmen coming over to Kuje to eat watery beans in the correctional center, because they don't have immunity, unlike governors and deputy governors, we will now have a semblance of sanity in our top tier of government. So the federal government has no business playing politics with judgment of the Supreme Court. They should ensure that this thing goes to play. Any local government that does not come to open its account according to the highlight protocol, they should not be giving their money. Let them go to court again, so that court can tell them to follow the protocols to receive their money. I think this politicking should stop, and let's face real governance as a country.
Now, Mr. Oni brilliantly puts us what in theory should be the case, but in its practicability, it's the hurdle of having a joint account with the states. And each month we see federal allocation continually disbursed to states way after this judgment. In enforcing it, when does it start? Should there be a deadline? How does the enforcement begin?
That was the point I was making. We've had at least 2 deadlines that we are not met. We don't need deadlines again. All the government needed to do, there is currently a window. Make it very clear. Possibly put it in advertorials, TVs, national dailies. Let it be quite unambiguous. Any local government that does not perfect and tidy up the requirement by the close of this new extension should know that he's the one that will put people in that local government in jeopardy of not receiving their legally accrued allocation. I think that's the way to go. Enough of politicking. Governors will do everything possible to ensure that this judgment doesn't kick off, because it's not in their interest. Everyone knows it.
Now, there's also another delay, technically from the angle of states that are yet to conduct local government elections, like Lagos. Still in Lagos, there's a conversation to convert LCDAs into local governments. And we have these peculiar situations in other states as it concerns local government elections, duly elected local government chairmen and councillors and whatnot. All this politicking that seems to also be some sort of hurdles has further weighed down this conversation on local government autonomy. How do we also tackle these peculiar situations using Lagos as the case scenario?
I think that's a non-issue, unfortunately. The Constitution and the judgment of the Supreme Court is very clear. There are 2 people that we can quickly highlight here. We have states like Lagos, like Ekiti State, my own state, that apart from the constitutionally recognized local government, also have what they call development areas. That is on one side. We now have states that have not yet conducted local government elections. So, except for the emergency rule, I think Rivers State falls in that category. If you bear in mind that the court says the election there is actually was illegal. So these 2 categories, the ones that did not outrightly conduct election to fill in civilian people elected by the people, the judgment. But flip side, we have states like Lagos, like Ekiti. They have the constitutionally recognized local government. They now have development areas. They have actually worked out a model for that. This local government, this LCDA, local council development areas, were carved out of certain local governments. So all they needed to do, if they still want to keep them, because I must be honest, the LCDAs had further brought development closer to the people. So for administrative convenience, the local governments where they were brought out in, and that was the template across, all they needed to do is they are still under the local government. So they just send a percentage of development grant to them. Because constitutionally from the federal government, resources are not sent. The resources are not sent to SCDAs. They are sent to LGAs, local government areas. But the LCDAs were carved out of certain LGAs. So when the resources come in lump sum, you just look at demography, the same way it's calculated in the federal, is sent to them, and development goes on. So I really don't think there is any problem about that, really.
Well, we'll find out in the coming days as it concerns this financial autonomy of local governments and the much anticipated developments for the grassroots. Let's go on to another national issue that occurred yesterday. In states like Rivers, in states like Lagos, we also hear that parts of the FCT, particularly Eagle Square, had the semblance of protests, where the Take It Back movement spearheaded that protest against the Cybercrime Act, the emergency rule in Rivers as well, but was greeted by police force and the use of tear gas to disperse protesters. Let's get your opinion of the events of yesterday. Hello, Mr. Oni, are you still with us? Well, it may seem as though there's
I was smiling because it's a semblance of protest. And typically find a way to shove itself in our national consciousness, which is good for us. A number of things they actually highlighted as the basis for their protest was the abuse of the cyber art by especially the security sector, of course, being spurred by our elected and non-elected leaders. I think that's a huge concern, and we must also tell ourselves that everyone should be bothered about the level of fake news, the level of misinformation, the level of disinformation we have seen, especially cyberbullying within and outside the country. It's now a major issue. And that was what necessitated bringing to the consciousness of all Nigerians the Cybercrime Act provision. But when you now have, for instance, someone critique a governor, and they take the person to a court, and of course we know the downside to our judiciary system, especially the lower court, like the magistrate court and the state courts. A lot of dependence on the body language of the executive is still very rift. And even at the national level, we are not lost of the fact that money still change hand before certain decisions are actually given, even in the major courts across the country. So, but it's good that this protest is going on so that those who think they can use the judiciary to stifle the liberty, the constitutionally guaranteed liberty that Nigerians have, should have a rethink, that people will definitely fight back. And that's what we are saying. But we must also let the government know that using tear gas to disperse people who are protesting, the way and manner we saw yesterday, we saw it in the FCT, I saw it also in a somewhere in the north. Is actually not the right way to go. If these concerns have been raised, the least that is expected of our government is to let them know that actions will be taken. I was glad it also coincided with the Nigerian National Police first day that we had yesterday. Because the major culprit when it comes to this issue are the Nigerian police. The IG must sit tight and ensure that his men are reigning. The way they just, bundle people. I had a personal experience, but it's been a while now. And thanks goodness, the person who came to my rescue is actually a DIG today. Frank Mba was the one who came to my rescue. I got a lead about the story, and the first person I called, I spoke to him that I just wanted to get the reaction of the Nigerian police force on the story before I start writing. And the next thing, he just cut off he did not give me any response. Immediately after that, I just noticed a call came in. I picked the call, and it was actually a police officer who was closer to my place. Somehow they were able to track my location. Somebody called me. I was saying some very funny things to me. So, of course, I have the number of the spokesperson at the headquarters at the time, who happens to be Frank Mba. So I called him. I told him. So it was not how did I get my story? I said, you don't ask a journalist how we got that story. I have the story. And even if they threaten me more than this, I'm going. But I'm just letting you know that the person I spoke to, this was his details. The person who later called me, this is the details. I will also write it in my news. So he now spoke to me, clarified things, spoke to them. They called, apologized, and we moved forward. So we shouldn't be having that as a country. Let's do our job as journalists. Anyone who uses that liberty wrongfully, of course, let the law take its course. But just bundling people and throwing them in jail because they criticize some policies of government is not one that should be encouraged in a democracy.
Now, I'm talking about protests and the semblance which we spoke about. It's so funny that times have so evolved that peaceful assemblages now as provided for in our constitution are greeted by tear gas, while some youths have also sought to use the online platforms as a ground for protest. The hashtag 30 days rants and some of the credits taken by individuals who say it has led to the payment of 77,000 naira allowance for core members is bringing a debate about how Nigerians might choose to assemble, either physically or online, owing to the fact that police often greets this protest with the reactions we saw yesterday. I don't know which you subscribe to. Should Nigerian youth explore both online protests and physical presence in city centers?
Certainly, those options are on the table. But for me, I'm a bit conservative. I think physical protest should be the last resort. And the reason why I'm that conservative is that from what happened yesterday, it's human beings that will go to the hospital, not non-living things. It's human beings. And the cost of health, the cost of the well-being of the individual, in my opinion, is non-committal to any noise anybody wants to make there. So it should be a last resort. But like I clearly said much earlier, the police really has no right to be throwing tear gas the way we've seen yesterday at peaceful protesters. Especially when these protests are going on in a non-violent manner. And what we saw yesterday was that they were gathered, they had a central location. And I learned they've written to the police, even though the police were a bit concerned that the protests coincided with their own day. But I must be also very, very harsh on the police here. What's the meaning of your day? There are many things going on simultaneously yesterday. So hiding under your day is bukum, is nothing. And they have their right constitutionally guaranteed to protest. You also have your right to do anything you want to do. And so your right should not impede on the right of the protesters. So there is no business doing that. But on my own conservative basis, I think a lot has been achieved online. But if we need to take it to the point where we now need to physically gather, nothing stops us. It's a constitutionally guaranteed right. And the police should not stop anybody from gathering, provided it is done in a lawful manner, the way we saw it yesterday.
Now let's talk about police and 7th of April being their day. Now going forward, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has made commitments towards police reforms, with the declaration of April 7 as the annual National Police Day in Nigeria. How significant and monumental is this in seeking for the reforms that we all agree that the police force needs?
It's very significant. I followed the event yesterday, and I was waiting for an official position by the federal government. Recollect that it was the vice president who represented the president at the occasion. So he actually put up a statement on his Facebook wall, but it was not detailed enough because it really did not talk about the plans to reform the Nigerian police force, which has been a trending issue. Remember that was one of the things that led to the this protest we had a few years ago.
Hashtag EndSARS protest in 2020.
EndSARS protest. Police reform was the core, the kernel of the issue at the time. Years after, we have not seen any major reform in our police force. We have not seen. What we have just seen are sound bites here and there by the president, sound bites by ministers, and people saddle responsibility to do the needful. I hope that this is not another sound bite. No, Nigeria is a nation where whenever we want to solve a problem, we create another problem to solve a problem. It's just typical of us. So when we create a day, hope is not going to be a day when police will now mount roadblocks and start collecting. I don't know if you did it while you were an undergraduate, what you call rat day. and and we start going around collecting money from people. Hope is not going to be a Bambiala day from next year, when police people will now say, this is our day, find us something. Hope that's not the type of day we will have. We want to see a police force that is seriously reformed, where serious-minded people who know the law, who know the law, not just knowing the law, they know the law in and out. They know their own rights, they know the rights of the citizenry, and they know where the midpoint between the right of the policeman and the right of the citizenry. Those are the type of police personnel we want to see, not the type of police personnel who be running after every young person who is driving a car under the guise that every young person who has a decent car is doing Yahoo. We don't want that type of police force. We don't want a police force who will bundle innocent citizens and start asking them to pay. That's not the police force. We don't want a police force who goes about POS and racketing people on the highway. We want a serious reform.
Mr. Seun Oni, just to add to your demands on the type of police force we need, is the central conversation on what it entails as an entry-level requirement into the force as against the mandate of the force. Now, the police is mandated with ensuring law and order. But if the entry levels do not qualify these officers with the fair knowledge of the law, I don't know if we need to up the balance or up the scale so that who is saddled with the responsibility of enforcing the law has a basic knowledge of what the law says. I don't know if it's an argument.
Well, I've heard that argument severally, but I think the entry requirement into the Nigerian police force today suffices, especially if you also know that the entry requirement to the Nigerian police force is the entry requirement for other paramilitary and military organizations in the country. It's the same. It's the O level. I think where the problem actually lies should be in the curricula. And let me use this opportunity to also call out to the person who is in charge of, who is the director of police training today. He's a retired, I think he retired as a commissioner, Ojukwu. He's in charge of their training now. He's my colleague in the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. My senior is a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. They need to work on their curriculum. I think that's where the problem is. We have some of their graduates. I think the focus is always on those who entered as officers rather than those who entered in the ranks. And those who enter with O level, they are usually giving this what you call crash course. They should take their time, maybe broaden the scope of the training to ensure that anyone coming out of the Nigerian Police College has a fair knowledge of the law. Because knowledge, something about knowledge that people really don't know is that you can't behave better than your level of knowledge. That is the truth. When you see a police person, for instance, dressed shabbily, is a knowledge issue. So when that gap is filled, the other gap that needed to be filled will now be in the area of monitoring, to monitor compliance. I think police is actually not doing so much about that. The last time I traveled by road, Abuja to Lagos, I saw how across all the states in the federation, all the states along that route, they were carelessly collecting money, and that's what they do every day. So if there is no tacit endorsement from the headquarters, I mean from the police force headquarters in Abuja here to the state commands, that cannot continue daily like that. So there is a monitoring gap in the police force. That's what you really see in the army. Before you know it, you just see somebody, a senior officer is on the road and it's ensuring that the right thing is done. But we don't see that in the police force. All these gaps must be built, and that is the reform we are talking about. Train people, but when you train them and you put them on the street, ensure that there is a monitoring. The monitoring side of the police force is activated across the 36 states and the FCT.
Very well said. Let's touch on one health issue off the back of the World Health Day that was commemorated as well. The World Health Organization has raised the alarm on Africa's record when it comes to maternal and newborn mortality, with figures well in millions and several thousands of women and newborns who die yearly. It continues to be a case of interventions. Here in Nigeria, the federal government had declared free cesarean sections to curb this, but implementation continues to lack in some quarters. Let's get your thoughts on this.
Maybe to add a bit of a data so that people can understand the huge issue. Globally, 300,000 women die annually during childbirth. Globally, over 1 million newborn die at the point of birth. That's something anybody should scream about. Here in Nigeria, across the continent, the burden of maternal and natal death is highest in Nigeria. And successive health minister had actually pretended that is a major issue. But we still see that record very high. It's even more worrisome when government hospitals have been told what to do. And when you get that, that's really not what you get. Let me just pick something that's very rampant in our hospitals. The moment they know that you know a bit of what government expects of you, they now start making some very funny demands. And they always hide under the fact that if you don't make it happen, if there is any complication, they now guilt trip you. For instance, men are forced to donate blood. I mean pints of blood. In most of the cases, we did a study then, and we discovered that 8 out of 10 times, these bloods are usually not used. Instead of storing this blood in the blood bank so that the next person can benefit, we don't know what happens in between. the next person coming will be expected to donate again. So it just turned to a big corruption pool in virtually all our government hospitals. Again, even though government says it should be free, you still see the standard protocol asking you to buy X, Y, Z, and the rest of them. So it still boils down to the same issue. A policy statement is made in Abuja, and there is an assumption by our leaders, and I don't know where they got that from, and it's sickening when you know that these are people who will tell you that they went to Harvard training, they went to Kellogg, went to these are simple policy dynamics that policy actually don't execute themselves. Between when policy statements are made and the execution, a whole lot goes into it. But usually what we do is that we make policies and we just assume that policy will take effect. We have to do better as a country if we want to drastically reduce this burden of maternal and natal death that we have been witnessing.
Very brilliantly put. We need to implement our policies to the latter. Lastly, is the policy of government that has been dubbed as an alternative to solving the removal of fuel subsidy crisis in terms of the cost of transportation, the Presidential Compressed Natural Gas Initiative. This morning we're hearing that by year end, it should be able to attract $1 billion in investments, that so far $491 million has been recorded, with over 84,000 jobs created through conversion centers. There's also conversations of ensuring that the penetration cuts across at least 30 states by the end of the year. How would you rate the PCNGI so far?
It was a good initiative, but we have seen a major progress thus far. But there is a concern that might impede its penetration. I don't know if you observe that. Whenever you are driving out now, is a norm that the queue for CNG is usually longer than the queue for petrol. I don't know if you observe that. That's what I've noticed.
I've observed this as well.
Across the FCT, you will see the queue for petrol. Quickly, people will fill their car and move. But CNG, you see them staying there sometimes for hours. So that's the reason why the federal government must ramp up investment so that we have more of these CNG centers. And the reason why you have that long queue is that more people are getting interested in converting into CNG because everyone had known that those initial fears, the fear that is very volatile, it will cause fire, it will cause that. We have seen, at least within the last few months, that those fears actually were misplaced fears. Also, it is cost effective. People using it have also clearly shown that the price of CNG will help you save costs, sometimes as high as 5 times over using petrol. So these are advantages that people should explore. But when you now see very long queue, you ask yourself, do I want to join this type of queue? So it is a good news that more investment will be brought in so that more CNG centers will be duplicated across the 36 states of the country. Let's also state it very loud that our state governor seems to shy away from being part of initiative as this. The federal government is always the one talking about what they are doing about CNG through the PCNG initiative. Let's also start having SCNG, where states will also take up that responsibility and maybe open more centers in order to bring in more people into the CNG pool, because we have seen that its advantages outweigh its disadvantages.
Well, I must thank you, Mr. Seun Oni, for taking our time to speak to the issues in the news. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Brian, for having me. It's always a privilege to be on ADBN.
Well, same here. Enjoy the rest of your day.